You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Okay, Chris, it's been a great morning already.
It has.
Man, we've had the opportunity to do a few podcasts today.
Yeah, well, we record 5 in a row every time we meet.
Yeah.
So most every time.
And so that's fun, and we've been doing a lot lately.
Yeah.
Because we have a special thing. We're trying to get a little bit ahead so that we can start offering some courses, right?
Yeah. Oh, you want to talk about that?
No, I don't want to talk about it. I was just mentioning that's why we're getting ahead.
You're just little hints.
Yeah.
Dropping little hints.
Yeah.
Okay,
For people who
right.
want to go a little further.
Yeah, well, if you're interested in what that means, just
stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
It's going to take a while. Okay, so hey, we like to do these 2 truths and a lie things every once in a while.
Yes.
And so on this one, Desiree asked Bonnie, my wife, who knows me better than anybody, she asked my wife to give 2 truths and a lie about me, and you have to figure out which one is the lie.
Okay.
So here are
Is there only just 3 statements?
There's just 3 statements, 2 truths and a lie.
But only one round.
Yes, just one round.
That's it.
Yep,
Okay.
Yep. So you got to try to guess.
Give it to me.
All right. I prefer Miracle Whip over mayonnaise. I love Cool Whip topping on desserts. I wore leg braces as a child.
What? Okay. So, wow, first of all. You have to love Cool Whip on desserts. So that one's a truth. You prefer Miracle Whip over mayonnaise? Was that one of
That's what it says, yeah.
Okay, first of all, who cares? Because they taste almost the same. But here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, because the 2 are so frivolous, and then there's one massive statement about leg braces, I have no knowledge. I've never heard you say leg braces. I've never once heard you talk about them ever in the years that I've known you. But because those are so radical, that statement is so radically different than the other ones, I'm going to say that that's true. And I'm going to say the Cool Whip is true. And I'm going to say the statement that's a lie is that you prefer Miracle Whip over mayonnaise.
So you're saying leg braces are true, Cool Whip is true, Miracle Whip is the lie.
Now, if I get it wrong, just do like The Price is Right and say, like, try again.
Try again.
Dang it! All right, well then fine. I'll go with the obvious statement.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. No, I'm not going to go with the obvious statement.
Okay.
I'm still going to say leg braces are true, and I'm going to say Miracle Whip is true, and I'm going to say that the statement that's false is that you like Cool Whip on your desserts.
That is true. I hate Cool Whip.
Oh wow!
I hate it.
Yeah. Okay. So my instincts about the statement about the leg braces was on.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But my assumption of your
I
love for
wore
desserts.
full-blown Forrest Gump leg braces up to my hips, the both sides of my leg all the way down to my shoe.
Mama says they're my magic shoes.
That's right. That's the truth. Yeah. Run, Forrest, run.
Wow.
Yeah. But if I fell down, I couldn't get back up by myself.
No.
And so kids would knock me down where we lived. My mom and I lived, we were hiding at that time, there's from violence. And so we lived in a trailer park, and I can remember multiple times kids knocking me down just because I couldn't get back up. So I'm like a turtle. I can't get back up,
Wow.
Laughing at me. Yeah.
Now, from what year? From ages what to what?
Oh, like 3 to 5.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I could just sleep in them, which was bad because you can't really roll over. But I had to wear them. Clink, clink,
Now,
clink.
you saw the movie Forrest Gump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Just like that.
just like it.
Mm-hmm.
So he sort of like, he wasn't able to really sort of walk.
Yeah.
He had to sort of like shimmy along.
Yeah.
That was you.
Yeah. That was me.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, because when I was born, I walked one foot right on top of the other. So I could run, but I couldn't walk. Yeah, so I ran everywhere as a little kid. So then they had to straighten my legs.
If I was going anywhere, I was running.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I really do prefer Miracle Whip over mayonnaise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got to tell you, I did not know that about you, and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners did not know
I
that
know.
about
So
you.
people are thrilled. It's riveting, wasn't it?
Riveting.
So those were good ones, Bonnie. Good job.
Wow.
Yeah. How cool is that?
Yeah, and I can't believe you don't like Cool Whip.
Oh, I hate Cool Whip.
Have you ever seen, he talked about saying cool, anyway, it doesn't matter, but it was Cool Whip.
Whip?
He says, why are you saying it that way? Cool Whip. And he goes, what do you mean? It's Cool Whip. And he said, yeah, that's what I said. Cool Whip. Stop saying it that way.
Well, it's okay. WH. Yeah. So, anyways, the passage today is John chapter 7.
It is.
And this is one of these, they're trying to arrest Jesus moments.
Yeah.
Which they keep trying to do. They tried to arrest him yesterday. They couldn't get him then either. But
Right.
so
well,
they're
and by the way, yesterday it said because it was not his time.
it's not his time.
It was like a supernatural forbiddance.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, so this feast that Jesus sneaks down to, he told his brothers he wasn't going to go
Yeah.
because it's going to draw too much attention. Then he goes, and then he goes and preaches in the temple. So that kind of draws some attention.
A little bit.
And then they try to arrest him, and they can't. And it's because it's 6 months before he's supposed to die, right? So That's it. Here we go. Because Jesus had an appointment with Passover. That's why he was heading there.
Right.
Anyways, John chapter 7, verse 32 says, when the Pharisees heard that the crowds were whispering such things, that, hey, he seems like a good guy. Or maybe they know that he is the Messiah. Remember that? How come they're not arresting him?
Yep.
Remember, that's what they're asking. So when the Pharisees heard that the crowds were whispering such things, they and the leading priests sent temple guards to arrest Jesus. But Jesus told them, I'll be with you only a little longer, and then I'll return to the one who sent me. You will search for me, but not find me, and you cannot go where I am going. The Jewish leaders were puzzled by this statement. Where's he planning to go? They asked. Is he thinking of leaving the country and going to the Jews in other lands? Maybe he'll even teach the Greeks. What does he mean when he says, you'll search for me but not find me, and you cannot go where I'm going? On the last day, the climax of the festival, Jesus stood and shouted to the crowds, anyone who is thirsty may come to me. Anyone who believes in me may come and drink. For the scriptures declare rivers of living water will flow from his heart. When he said living water, he was speaking of the Spirit who would be given to everyone believing in him. But the Spirit had not yet been given because Jesus had not yet entered into his glory. When the crowds heard him say this, some of them declared, surely this man is the prophet we've been expecting. Others said, he is the Messiah. Still others said, but he can't be. Will the Messiah come from Galilee? For the scriptures clearly state that the Messiah will be born of the royal line of David in Bethlehem, the village where King David was born. So the crowd was divided about him. Some even wanted him arrested, but no one laid a hand on him. When the temple guards returned without having arrested Jesus, the leading priests and Pharisees demanded, why didn't you bring him in? We've never heard anyone speak like this, the guards responded. Have you been led astray too? The Pharisees mocked. Is there a single one of us rulers or Pharisees who believes in him? This foolish crowd follows him, but they are ignorant of the law. God's curse is on them. Then Nicodemus, the leader who'd met with Jesus earlier, spoke up. Is it legal to convict a man before he's given a hearing? He asked. They replied, are you from Galilee too? Search the scriptures and see for yourself. No prophet ever comes from Galilee. Then the meeting broke up and everybody went home.
So Nicodemus tries to speak up on his behalf, and they basically shut him up and sit him down.
Yeah.
Are you from Galilee too? Go ahead, say the words. Right? You want to be lumped in with him?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a massive sort of a tone in But and by the way, it's not only is Nicodemus moved, but the guards are moved.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And they said, why didn't you bring him in? The guards are like, because he's amazing. Right? He's amazing.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're the ones that know the law.
Right.
So in other words, the thousands of people, they're all ignorant.
Right.
Like they're pawns.
Right.
They're like cattle.
Yep.
Right. We're the ones in authority. We're the ones that know the scriptures. And God's curse is on them because they're all ignorant.
And you can see here some of the elitism of the Pharisees because they just can't stand anybody from Galilee. Right. So the day before, it was talking about how he clearly was uneducated. How do they know he was uneducated? He's a 32, 33-year-old man.
Yep.
Right. They didn't say, hey, can we see your degree? Do you have a diploma? Anything? It was it was his accent. Right, so the Galileans had a unique accent. We know that because later on, Peter, they accuse him and go, away. "Yeah, we know you're from Galilee because your accent." So they kind of see Jesus and his followers as a bunch of hillbillies.
Right.
That's how they're looking at him. Right, and I can make fun of hillbillies because I are one, as redneck as it gets. But that's how they view it, is that he's just a hillbilly. And so when they turn to Nicodemus, these are the Harvard grads. These are all the geniuses in town. And they look at him and go, really? Really? Are you also a hillbilly? That's what they're doing there, right? They just are so gross in how prejudiced they are against just a population based on their accent and the fact that they're not as educated or whatever. But I think the interesting thing is, again, they're saying, are you from Galilee too? Search the scriptures and see for yourself. No prophet ever comes from Galilee. Well, the interesting thing is the Bible doesn't say no prophet ever comes from Galilee. The Bible just doesn't say a prophet does come from Galilee.
Right.
Right? Except if you skip the next story, which is the woman caught in adultery. That's what we're talking about tomorrow. And you go to the next phrase, he's still in this context. And he does quote Isaiah and mentions where they're coming from, because Isaiah is talking about Galilee. Oh. So the very next sentence he preaches to them is him quoting Isaiah talking about Galilee.
Wow.
Right. So interesting. Now, the quote doesn't say anything about Galilee, but the passage he quotes from does.
Right.
So he's letting them know, I'm the fulfillment of Isaiah, which really causes trouble. Anyways, that's a whole other thing.
Which, by the way, it says, so they know the scripture and they say, isn't the Messiah supposed to come from Bethlehem?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he actually says, for the scriptures clearly state that the Messiah will be born of a royal line of David in Bethlehem, the village where King David was born. So, and they're like, but he's not from there. He's from the north side. Right? We know he grew up in Galilee.
Yeah.
But what's so interesting is that we know in Luke chapter 2 that David was from Bethlehem and Joseph was from Bethlehem. And because Caesar Augustus issued a consensus that the world should be taxed, that they traveled all the way down to Bethlehem. And then Mary gave birth to Jesus in Bethlehem. Yeah. And then they spent time in Egypt and they came back to
And we know from
Nazareth.
those long lineages at the beginning of Matthew and in the beginning of Luke that both Mary and Joseph were from the royal line of King David.
Yes.
They would have been probably heirs.
Yes.
Right?
And so my question is this. I bring all that up to say this. Yeah. How come they didn't ask him where he was born?
Well, for the same reason that they didn't ask him for his degree. They just said he was uneducated.
Right. Just bad assumptions.
They liked his tricks.
Yeah.
They liked that he was doing all these miracles and he said really intriguing things. They just had no interest in him as a man. Right? I think it's the same. I think we can do the same thing sometimes. We get obsessed with asking God to answer our prayers, and we're chasing the gifts and not the gift giver. Right? And that's what they're doing. They don't want to know him. They just want him to do stuff for them. Right?
Yeah.
That's and I think sometimes as Christians, we can get sucked into that where we just want God to do stuff for us, but we don't take the time to really get to know him. And that's why having a daily devotional like this is so important, right? As we spend time in his word, we get to know him more. You spend time with Jesus, you start liking him.
Yeah. And then here's another, it's not a very fun conversation, but here's an example of religious leaders who start to think that they're high and mightier than they should be, right? Than they should. And yet Jesus here in this story is worth worshiping. And so it's just, again, it's another little mini sermon that tells us there's a lot of listeners out there. They've had bad experience in churches, right? And they didn't have necessarily a bad experience with Jesus. They just had bad experience with the religious leaders. And so if you're out there and you are listening and you have had a bad experience with either a pastor or a priest or maybe, some people who are, have influence within the church and there's some kind of political garbage that's happening, or maybe even some corruption. Just know that, that the church is run by imperfect people, and sometimes people lose their way. And so here's the Pharisees. At their heart, I believe the Pharisees were good people. I believe that they thought
they wanted to be good people.
They wanted to be good people. Yeah. They wanted to serve God.
Yeah.
They thought for years they were serving God, but they sort of crept into this. They created this culture that wasn't healthy for anybody or anything.
Well, it's possible to be really good at the wrong things.
Yeah.
So they were really good at religion and missed out on the relationship with God.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and then there's massive examples here of the Pharisees being oppressive, and they probably didn't think that they were being. They thought, but this is for the people's benefit, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, no, it's oppressive.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean, right?
And they thought it was their job to be the thought police.
Right.
Oh, you have wrong thoughts. We have to crush that.
Right.
Right.
Right. Well, in this case, it's very obvious. Like pretty much from here to the end of the Gospels, we see the worst of the Pharisees.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now it's somebody's threatening my power. Somebody's threatening, we're the ones in charge, not this other person. And there's a tipping point in the crowd, and it gets to the place to where we're going to have to put a halt to this, because if we let this thing go on any further, then our existence becomes threatened.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we do see that at times in leadership at churches. And when people start to think themselves higher than they should, or selfishly, or just even like I said with corruption, I think that it's important for our listeners to understand Jesus is still here in the story.
Yeah.
And Jesus is still worth worshiping. And it's not Jesus who we're offended by. So don't run away from God. Don't turn your back on faith. Don't turn your back on your belief in Jesus. Just find a better church.
Yeah. I also think I'm confused a little bit by, so what was the danger that Jesus brought to these guys? Right? They had a stranglehold on the entire Jewish population, and they couldn't give a rip. They were like, what's he going to go start teaching Greeks too? Ugh. They hated the Samaritans. Mm-hmm. So they didn't care about anybody else except the Jews, and they had a stranglehold on the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. So a few people followed Jesus. Man, there were millions that were making sacrifices at the temple and listening to the Pharisees, and you don't ever really find any real threat from Jesus. And I'm always wondering about this: people who want to police thought and to police language. There's some language that's acceptable, some language is not. There's some thoughts that are acceptable, some that are not, and we must crush all language and all thoughts that don't conform with our belief system or what we believe. So in the arena of free thought and in the arena of free words, if my words are that strong, why do I have to be worried about your words? If my belief is that strong, why do I have to be worried about your belief? You state yours, I'll state mine, and the free market says people will go, boy, I think Jeff's is more reasonable than Chris's. Right? That if I'm just that comfortable,
or that Chris is more reasonable
right.
than Jeff's,
but then that would mean that yours is superior to mine, right? But what I should desire is to learn. I should desire for truth, right? But whenever you find people policing thought and policing words, they're not interested in truth. They're interested in their power and their narrative. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I've had conversations before with religious leaders around the world that were not of the Christian faith that lead in nations where the majority is one religion, and they tend to hold back or crush all the other religions. And so working for peace in those countries and working for religious freedoms and the idea of freedom of conscience, right? Not just freedom of religion to practice your religious ceremonies inside of a building somewhere with a steeple on it, but rather freedom of conscience to live your life as according to your faith. And so we talk a lot about that. And I'll often ask, so what is the threat of Christianity to your belief system? Is your belief system, so is your belief system true? Yes, absolutely 100% true. Christianity is completely false. Okay. So if it's so true, is God behind your religion? Yes. Okay. Then what's the threat? Just allow the two of them to stand in the same arena freely. And it seems like people would be able to sort that out, wouldn't it?
Right.
And then we need to defend our faith. But what they did, they weren't defending their faith. They were looking to control people's thoughts, and they were willing to kill their opposition. That's
right.
very different than just saying, I'm going to learn how to explain my faith from a defensive position to be able to explain why it's true and why it's right? And so I think we should always be skeptical of anybody who's trying to crush dissent, anybody who's trying to crush free words or free thought, or freedom of conscience.
Yeah, and so you sort of said a few minutes ago, you sort of started with the question like, what was the real threat here, to them, right?
Yeah.
And I believe it's probably three things. Number one, the Pharisees probably thought they're the ones that are going to endorse the Messiah. They're the ones that are going to recognize him, right? The people don't get to tell them who the Messiah is, right? They're the ones that have to say who the Messiah is. Number two, I believe that it's honestly most of it. I think most of it is the idea that they enjoyed the power and the control. And with Jesus, it seems like they were losing power and control. It was like, they were kings and all of a sudden they weren't the kings anymore. Here comes another king, right? So to speak.
Yeah.
And then the third thing I think that in a lot of ways, they understood that once the Messiah came, that their role wasn't as important because the Messiah sort of does away with a lot of those things, right? So in other words...
Yeah, but I don't know if they perceived that he would do away with the law.
No. I'm just saying, not Jesus himself, but the Messiah.
Yeah.
Because up until the Messiah comes, you come through us for your forgiveness.
Right.
Right? You come through us for all things.
Yeah.
Right? For all things. And once the Messiah comes, he's going to sort of do away with a lot of that stuff.
Well, they didn't have a sense that he was going to change their religion at all. They only had a sense that he was going to be a political leader that was going to deliver them from Rome. At this point, these guys did.
Yeah.
And so they would have been the right-hand man to the Messiah, right? So that part of it wasn't the issue. It's just that they decided Jesus wasn't the guy.
So you don't think they perceived the Messiah as someone that would dethrone their system?
No. I think they were looking forward to the Messiah. They just decided he wasn't it. Certainly not some hillbilly from Galilee.
That's interesting.
Right. So because they're not saying they don't want a Messiah. They're just saying he can't be from Galilee. Right. And so but I would agree with the other two. It's a power issue. They're afraid that the people's opinions are going to be so deeply believed that it's going to dethrone them with power. Certainly. Yeah. But again, that's why I'm asking. And this is at the root of it whenever I'm working with government leaders or whatever around the world, asking that question is because if you really want truth, you're not afraid of an exchange of ideas.
Right.
If you want power, and it's a self-serving power. So if you want truth for your people and you're a servant leader for your people, then let's test all ideas and all thoughts. And the best thoughts and ideas will rise to the top. Let's go ahead and debate. Let's exchange. Let's love each other even while we work through these things and we disagree, right? You can do that. But if you're a self-serving leader afraid of losing power and your power structure is in your religious system, then you can't have any challenge to it, right? Mm-hmm. And then, hey, let's just be honest what kind of leader you are. You're a self-serving leader who's afraid of losing power. Mm-hmm. That's it, right? And I think we see it today. We see it on social media. We see it in our country. We see it around the world. There are a lot of people who are willing to go ahead and crush the best ideas or even any other idea because it's dissenting against what they've decided is a narrative that's acceptable.
Yeah,
that's what got Jesus killed eventually.
Yeah. Well, that is...
and that's what those kind of people do.
Right. There's a lot in there.
Yes, there is.
Because that's a mouthful right there. So that's our time. So we will see you next time on The Bible Guys.